Florence and her sister loved to imagine the scenes that had taken place in that old kitchen. Strange and thrilling, perhaps terrible scenes. They knew the story of Dethick, and now you shall hear it too. In that old time, which Tennyson calls the spacious days of great Elizabeth, Dethick belonged to a noble family named Babington. It was a fine house then. The oaken door of the old kitchen opened on long corridors and passages, which in turn led to stately halls and noble galleries. There were turrets and balconies overlooking beautiful gardens, and on the stone terrace gay lords and ladies used to walk and laugh and make merry, and little children run and play and dance, and life go on very much as it does now, with work and play, love and laughter, and tears. One of the gay people who used to walk there was Anthony Babington. He was a gallant young gentleman and an ardent Catholic, and devoted to the cause of the beautiful and unfortunate Mary, Queen of Scots. Though ardent and devoted, Babington was a weak and foolish young man. He fell under the influence of a certain Ballard, an artful and designing person who had resolved to bring about the death of the great English Queen Elizabeth, and was induced by him to form the plot which is known in history as Babington's Conspiracy. So he was brought to ruin and death. In the year 1586, Queen Mary was imprisoned at Wingfield Manor, a country house only a few miles distant from Dethick. The conspirators gathered other Catholic noblemen about them and planned to release Queen Mary and set her once more on the throne. They used to meet at Dethick, where it is said there is a secret passage underground leading to Wingfield Manor. Perhaps, who knows, they may have sat in the kitchen, gathering about the great fireplace for warmth, the lights out for fear of spies, only the firelight gleaming here and there, lighting up the dark corners and the eager, intent faces. And when the plot was discovered, and Queen Elizabeth's soldiers were searching the country round for the young conspirators, riding hither and thither along the pleasant country lanes, and thrusting their sabres in among the blossoming hedgerows, it was here at Dethick that they sought for Anthony Babington. They did not find him, for he was hiding elsewhere, but one of his companions was actually discovered and arrested there. Perhaps, again, who knows, this man may have been hiding in the secret chamber above the trap door. One can fancy the pursuers rushing in, flinging open cupboards and presses in search for their prey, and finding no one, gathering baffled around the fireplace. Then one chance to glance up, catch a sight of the trap door in the ceiling. Ha, lads, look up! The rascal may be hiding yonder. Up with you, you tall fellow! Then a piling of benches, one man mounting on another's shoulders, the door forced open, the young nobleman seized and overpowered and brought down to be carried off to London for trial. Anthony Babington and his companions were executed for high treason, and Queen Mary, who was convicted of approving the plot, was put to death soon after. All this Florence Nightingale and her sister knew, and they never tired of playing suppose in old Dethick kitchen, and living over again in fancy the romantic time long past. And on Sundays the two children went with their parents to old Dethick church, and sat where Anthony Babington used to sit, for in his days it was the private chapel of Dethick. It is a tiny church, 50 people would fill it to overflowing, but Florence and her sister might easily feel that the 4 bare walls held all the wild history of Elizabeth's reign. Anthony Babington in doublet and hose, with velvet mantle, feathered cap, and sword by his side. Little Florence Nightingale in round leghorn hat and short petticoats. It is a long step between these two, yet they are the 2 most famous people who ever said their prayers in old Dethick Church. The lad's brief and tragic story contrasts strangely with the long and beautiful story of Florence Nightingale, a story that has no end. When Florence was between 5 and 6 years old, she left Lea Hall for a new home, Lea Hurst, about a mile distant. Here her father had built a beautiful house in the Elizabethan style of stone with pointed gables, mullioned windows, and latticed panes. There was a tiny chapel on the site he chose, hundreds of years old, and this he built into the house, so that Lea Hurst, as well as Lea Hall and Dethick, joined hands with this old historic time. In this little chapel, by and by, we shall see Florence holding her Bible class. But I like still to think of her as a little rosy girl, running about the beautiful gardens of Lea Hurst, or playing house in the quaint old summer house with its pointed roof of thatch. Perhaps she brought her dolls here, but the dolls must wait for another chapter. Soon after moving to Lea Hurst, the Nightingales bought still another country seat, Embley Park in Hampshire, a fine old mansion built in Queen Elizabeth's time and at some distance from Lea Hurst. After this the family used to spend the summer at Lea Hurst and the winter at Embley. There were no railroads then in that neighborhood. The journey was sometimes made by stagecoach, sometimes in the Nightingales' own carriage. Embley Park is one of the stately homes of England, with its lofty gables, terraces, and shadowing trees, and all around it are sunny lawns and gardens filled with every sweet and lovely flower. Now you know a little of the 3 homes of Florence Nightingale: Lea Hall, Lea Hurst, and Embley Park. Next you shall hear what kind of child she herself was.